Welcome to the For the Church podcast, another great gospel-centered resource from Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. My name is Jared Wilson. I'm an associate professor of pastoral ministry and author in residence at Midwestern Seminary. And I'm here as always with my friend and my colleague and my co-host, Dr. Ronnie Kurtz, assistant professor of systematic theology. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I do okay. There's something, I know I brought this up before. When I say Midwestern Seminary the second time in the intro,
Yeah.
I always feel like I'm saying Medwestern. Does it not sound that way?
No, not at all.
There's something about the order of the words, the way the vowels.
Nah, you're good, man.
No? It sounds like I'm saying Med. Every time I get really self-conscious about saying it every single time.
You do you, man. You're doing great. Yeah.
I'm self-conscious. This is the same shirt that I've worn for the last, they don't want you to know this because we're supposed to change outfits. For the last 4 videos, it's been this same shirt.
Dang.
I just changed the jacket. You're actually like changing whole outfits.
Yeah, kind of. I do 2 shirts.
We have to make sure the cameras are off.
Yeah.
Because Ronnie's changing clothes in the studio. Yeah.
You're doing all the
we don't
behind the
want any
scenes
kind of
stuff,
live
man.
behind the scenes stuff
Please don't.
going on.
Yeah,
For the
that's
church
right.
after dark.
Oh,
We don't want anything like that going on. But I wear the same shirt. I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably I shouldn't have pointed it out.
Yeah,
I figure if
you're
it's a
just doing
white
some-
shirt, it's like
That's
no,
universal.
Yeah. It's like you're just wearing a
Mormons
suit.
wear
with
it.
I even have my badge. But I don't know what I do with my badge.
You know, I had someone tell me the other
Badge.
day. They were like, I legitimately don't listen to podcasts, but I always listen to the first 10 minutes of you and Jared.
Some
I
people
was like,
I
first
love it.
10 minutes,
It's a
wow.
person after my own heart because I do the same thing.
Yeah, that's
I
wild.
go back and go, what was the banter about
Yeah,
on that
yeah.
episode?
It's so funny. I think some people know this. I'm not a banter guy.
People hate banter.
Yeah, I hate it. If I listen to a podcast and I'm gonna get to the subject or I'm gonna set myself on fire.
I
Like,
love banter. To
I'm
me,
following you.
It's human.
Yeah, that's good.
When people
do
say,
like
I
to
don't
be
like the
human.
banter, just get to the facts. I'm like, okay, robot.
You
You don't
need-
want
you need
want
more
your
oil today.
You
You're
don't
a
want
little-
your
little
content to come
hangry.
from human beings who have lives and hearts and emotions. That to me is what banter is. It
It
feels
just-
like I'm at a table.
Yeah.
Overhearing
friend.
the conversation between friends. I like that.
Yeah, we've fooled everybody that we're friends.
I mean, we really don't spend a whole lot of time together outside of this.
We could change
this
that.
room.
I don't know.
Well,
Yeah, we'll
I
see.
don't
We'll
know.
keep
We'll
it like
see.
this.
I'm on sabbatical, taking a break from you people. It's a mailbag.
Hey-o.
We don't need a transition. It's a mailbag. We usually just jump right on into these. So let's jump right on into these. This question comes from Josiah via email. Josiah says, I'm a newly minted youth pastor at a solid SBC church, and the youth program I am coming into is a blank canvas in many ways. How should I structure the program? I'd love to hear your thoughts on the key priorities and broad strokes of how you would proceed in my shoes. I have substantial leeway and creative freedom. First
Praise
thing I
God.
would say is that's really unique.
That's
actually,
awesome, yeah.
especially for student ministry, where a lot of times things are they're dictated to you.
Yeah.
Whether existing structures that have been decided are successful or just parental pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I think the biggest sort of pressures in student ministry are not the students themselves or even pastors over student pastors, but the parents who expect a certain kind of
Yeah.
thing, or at least that's how it was in my day. So, first of all, praise God.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
what should Josiah do? I mean,
Yeah.
it's a blank canvas.
I
He
love
can do
this.
whatever he
I
wants.
love that. He's in
Pizza,
a solid.
video games, set up an octagon,
You know me, man.
pickleball,
Wow.
UFC. What's
Mountain
it?
Dew.
Is it Gaga? What's
Oh, yeah. Gaga ball. Yeah.
Gaga
yeah,
ball? Yeah, that's what you need. Just need enough
yeah,
space for
good.
those 3.
Next question. Just kidding. No, that's great, man. Praise God that you're at a solid SBC church and this is your story. Two very quick things. These aren't overly brilliant that I would say here. One is get them develop the youth ministry in a way where it is pointing to and reintegrating into the full body.
Yeah.
I think there's too many youth ministries that are almost a parachurch that happen to share the same address with.
You're in a little silo of
That's
your own.
exactly
Yeah.
right. So get them into the actual ecclesia. Get them into the body. Make sure they know that this isn't church. This is a youth program that we do. The real thing is the whole life of the church, etc. And the second is don't underestimate what teenagers can handle. I think this is a huge problem in youth ministry. I think if you pressed into kind of the sociological, psychological complexity of teenage life right now, the amount of, I mean, this sounds silly, but the amount of layers young people know for like meme culture just shows, as silly as that sounds, it shows there's actually some intellectual ability there. And I know that sounds silly, but they're like holding on to 7 different layers deep of inside joke at that point. Or if you want a better analogy, like think about how complex even a football playbook is, or their high school chemistry class. Like they can handle stuff. So give them Bible, give them theology,
Yeah, right.
give them church history, and don't say like, oh, we got to make this youth level. Like, obviously do age appropriate stuff, whatever, but make sure they're listening, make sure they're reading up, they're thinking up. That will help them have a stable foundation long term.
Yeah, I think the church connection is really key, whatever you can do. So don't have competing events or programs or gatherings that would take your students out of the normal gathering of the church,
That's right.
perhaps even other meetings of the church. But I think a midweek meeting is fine, Sunday evening or whatever, is if there's an alternative time to have an age-specific, but in that time to have to not be afraid to go deep. If these kids can learn algebra and whatever else in school, they can learn theology at church. And in fact, you should think of it, Josiah, as preparing them not just for adult life in the church, but for when they leave home, go out to school, take jobs. What kind of worldview preparation can you give them? Equip them with the theological depth, the biblical knowledge to be able to spot counterfeit messages in the world. And that also, I think, speaks to just the importance of gospel centrality.
Yeah.
The kids that last in the faith aren't just those who have a lot of apologetic knowledge and, theological knowledge. They're those who love Jesus. And so, making sure that you bring things back to the good news constantly. One of the first agenda items, I think, would be to begin, not every kid in the youth group probably has parents who are active in the church but probably most of them do. And so maybe if you can get some meetings with some parents and families and just say, how can I help you? How can I be praying for you, first of all? But how can I assist in the discipleship? Like, I'm not trying to replace, you don't need to say that, but even to somehow undercut the idea that the youth group experience is what Christian parents do to kind of farm out the discipleship of their kids. You may actually be planting seeds in parents' minds about how they ought to be leading the discipleship of their children simply by saying, how can I assist you or how can I support you in caring for your kids? Or it's a great way to also just get to know, your students' needs and those sorts of things. But I think the two kind of biggest components is, apart from the gospel centrality piece, it's just personal discipleship and being one to the life of the local church. So if you can not just put on a program that has, features in it, but somehow either through a volunteer base or if it's small enough and you have enough time, you yourself, can you invest personally in them? Can you organize maybe even a cross-generational discipleship, older women, meeting with teenage girls and older men meeting with teenage boys or something where there's a discipleship component so that they're actually being, mentored and invested in, particularly by other, folks in the church. I think that just goes a long way.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's a great question. Man, praise God, you've got a blank canvas there. This comes from Arturo via email. Arturo says, what questions should pastors be asking of the churches or pastoral search committees that are looking to potentially call them as their pastor, lead, senior, associate, etc.? He says, I've known and heard of so many pastors who preach in view of a call. They get hired by the church, and then they get blindsided by things they were not told during the hiring process. What are some good questions that would equip pastors to better gauge the kind of congregation leadership dynamic before taking on their potential role in the church? This is really similar to a question we had on the last mailbag, where it was basically a prospective member, and that was an excellent question as well. What should prospective members ask the pastors before they join a church? The prospective members get asked a bunch of questions, but what questions should they have? It's similar. It's not the same, but it's similar. What are the unique angles on
there are some
prospective
answers
pastor?
that I have that actually really are overlapping, because I think like a couple healthy questions would be, if we're sitting here a year from now and you guys are pumped that you hired me, what are the reasons? Like what happened over the last year,
Yeah.
or 5 years, so that you can kind of see even the culture of like, what do you celebrate
Yeah.
as a church, and then even vice versa. Like if if this didn't work out, what are the fears that you thought might have not worked out? I think as well. There is something, and we might have mentioned this in that episode that you're referring to, Jared, of like every church has unwritten values, and trying to discern those from the, if you want to call it negotiation table, but trying to discern those from like the calling table or in the hiring table is hard. But like, what are the unwritten cultural values of this church? So you have the values that you have online. That's great. But what are things that you would say are tangible? I'll be able to tell them in 5 years. I would be able to answer this question. But right now, I can't see this is the unwritten culture of this church.
Yeah. Yeah, I think asking, and this is similar to my answer to that previous question too, is like, what are some significant challenges the church has faced in the last 5-10 years? What's the deepest suffering or the biggest obstacle or significant challenge, and how did the church, overcome that? How did they get through that? I would want to know. I mean, no, you don't want dirt on previous pastors or anything like that, and the church, church wouldn't want to give you that. But I would want to know about the tenure of previous leadership, where and they'll probably give you kind of broad strokes. So the previous pastor was here for 5 years,
whatever.
10 years, 2 years, whatever it is. But I want to know about like the last 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And if those have been very short tenures, I'm asking questions like, well, why do you think that is? What what was consistent? Is there a reason that you can see that that has a pattern, something, a pattern of some kind, that'll just, because what this is in the search process is like, especially if you want to go, to a place, you're trying to sell them on you. They're trying to sell them, to you as well. And so it's almost like a blind, a dating.
Yeah.
You've been set up or something. Like they're going to give you their best, the best picture of themselves. And so again, if you're, a pastoral candidate, there is I guess an appropriate level of modesty or privacy or something. But man, if I'm going to like move my family, if I'm going to commit, like this is where I plan to be, and any, I think, good pastor, doesn't go to a church thinking I'm only going to be here a year or 2 years. Like they're thinking this is where I want to be for as long as the Lord will let me be. That's a serious thing. So I want to know some depth. Like if you've had a succession of 2-year pastors, like why do you think that is?
That's right.
Let's talk about that. How will that be different if, what's going on? And so there are things to kind of tease out, and depending on the search committee or the person, sometimes it's not the committee, but maybe you've clicked with somebody. When I was, last doing being looked at by a search team, there was like, I got along and I felt like I clicked with the whole, search committee, but there was one guy in particular and his wife that me and my wife just really hit it off with. And we spent a lot of time with, and they showed us around town when we came in to visit. And he was a guy I could go deeper with.
Yep.
That I could say things like, okay, where are the power centers of the church, man? What do I really need to know? And he was a guy, he was sympathizing. I was in Tennessee. I was thinking about moving to Vermont, and that was a big culture shock. I got 2 little kids. My wife's going to quit her nice full-time job to come do this. So he was willing to kind of give me some of that stuff. I wasn't trying to, get into the skeletons in their closet, so to speak. But I just wanted to know, frankly, like, man, this is, serious business, and this is spiritual business. And so let's talk about, like, what's the dynamic of the church? What's the personality of the church? What are the landmines that the last few guys have stepped on without realizing? So I want to be aware of those things. I want to know about the financial state. A lot of pastors have gone to a church and they've been told this is how much we'll pay you, and this is what our budget is. But you don't know things like we're actually this, neck deep in debt, and there's all sorts of things. We got a building that's falling down all around us, and so the budget looks healthy, but it's actually not enough to cover everything that's going on. We've got how many hundreds of thousands in deferred maintenance or whatever it is. Those are things you want to know because, bro, like if you're the lead guy in most churches, you have to navigate that.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
you know, and if you feel out of your depth on those kinds of things, as I would be reticent to go like, well, unless you have someone else who can kind of spearhead that, I don't know that as a lead pastor.
That's right.
I want to spend 40% of my time trying to figure out how to keep this building in shape and managing this, that, or getting us out of debt. Those are all the kinds of things that I would be asking.
Yes.
What's behind, I don't know. What do I discover on the 5th, 6th date?
Yeah, yeah.
I want to know
Yeah,
that stuff
yeah.
before I
That's
put a
right.
ring on your finger. Those are some things.
I
Yeah,
like it.
yeah. Speaking of rings on the
Hey,
finger,
oh, that's pretty
hey,
good, man.
transition. This
Yeah.
comes from Matt via email. I'm a lay pastor who's been asked by a member of my community group to conduct premarital counseling and then marry her and her fiance. We're against polygamy on this podcast, bro, but officiate the marriage. That's what I
Yeah.
started to say.
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
all know what I mean. We say I married he and
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
but let's just say I officiated the wedding. Marry her and her fiance early next year. What advice do you have for a pastor doing these things for the very first time?
I like this.
Yeah, I say don't overthink it. It's just
Yeah.
marriage. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. No, I was actually going to say the exact opposite. What's a great joke. I think marriage counseling can sometimes be a thing pastors are like, I know it's part of the job. I have to do this. But
Yeah.
if part of the job of pastoring is truly like shepherding and shaping the soul of the congregants towards Christ, there is a really vulnerable season that is premarital counseling that is like really primed for discipleship. And there are conversations like I just had an amazing premarital counseling experience. Shout out Dave Becker if you're listening. Him and his wife Laurel were just amazing for Kristen and I. And there were things they brought up in our premarital that I would not have thought to bring up just in talking with Kristen as we were, taking steps towards marriage. And maybe because I had a good experience with it, I know that's not everyone's story. I want to take it seriously. And so I would say for pastors, especially for this, this brother, take it seriously. And so what that probably means is maybe for your first time, don't write your own curriculum, maybe.
Okay.
Unless you feel like you're uniquely gifted at that. But I would actually study and research the way that you would a sermon series, like read a few, pick up the Paul David Tripps of the world and those kinds of like marriage curriculum stuff and premarital curriculum, and pull out like what's the best, what's not helpful, what's helpful. Make a list of topics you want to talk about. I think those are like really basic but helpful things.
Yeah, broad strokes for me because sometimes it's different every time. And I more recently I have been using a little book called Tying the Knot, which was recommended to me by a fellow pastor several years ago. I find it very helpful. It asks the right questions. It's a combination of work the couple does on their own together, and then work that you kind of work through together. They report on that, and then there are leader questions that you can see, and it kind of goes into areas that a lot of couples may not be disposed to, and it kind of goes into areas that you may not even think to go into.
Yeah.
Especially practical roles in the home, all those sorts of things. That was the most helpful aspect when I look back. So Becky and I have been married for 30 years now. We had premarital counseling. It was not gospel-centered. It was not in-depth. But the most helpful part of it, I think, was looking at family history and what we had been kind of accustomed to.
Yeah.
Our pastor, he was wise enough to know and experienced enough to know, like, you bring that into the home, that can just be an unrealized or unrecognized. It sounds so simple, but you bring in what you think is normal.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes in that first year, usually at the end of the first year, towards the end, because in the early months, it's all honeymoon. Everything's fine. Everything's great. But your normal may be different from your spouse's normal. She grew up in a home where mom did this and dad did that, and you grew up in a home where it was the opposite or less of that or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just normal for you. It's not right or wrong. I mean, it's one thing if we're talking about lazy dads and mean mothers or whatever, but it's just like how roles were divided up, what was customary. So you're kind of the product of your home environment, and it's not good, bad, or indifferent. It's just that was your normal, and those two normals clash if they're different.
Mm-hmm.
And so just even walking through things like that sometimes we want to be on the theological level. This is what love is. This is what marriage is.
Covenant. Yeah.
You need to forget, you got to do all that. Yes and amen. And you want to make sure this marriage is going to be founded on the gospel, and so that they're primed to bring grace to each other. But even getting down to the nitty gritty of like, who takes out the trash?
That's right.
Who's going to do, wash the dishes? Who's going to, all those sorts of things. I just think that's really helpful because you can kind of, forestall those things. I always ask, the opening question is always, why do you want to be married?
Yep.
And there are wrong answers, but there's a number of right answers. It's not like I'm looking for the one specific thing. But I just want to give one example of a couple. Shout out to Chris and Rachel. So I haven't officiated a lot of weddings, Ronnie, and it's because I'm very, very particular.
Yeah.
Actually, I say no. I've said no quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But every couple for over the last 30 years that I have officiated, they're all still married. So I just
come
praise
on,
God for
batting
that.
1,000. Yeah.
That's a credit to them. It's a credit to God's grace for sure. But it's also, I think, a credit to I just don't hey, come on, I'll do it,
Same.
I'm pretty particular. But anyway, this couple, Chris and Rachel, I asked, why do you want to be married? Chris gives I love her, love the Lord, she loves the Lord, da-da-da. I asked Rachel. She says, well, I learned from when my brother was my roommate how difficult it is for me to live with somebody else. And so I can't think of anything that would be more sanctifying for me than to be married. And I said, I've never heard, not only have I never heard that answer, I've never heard an answer that was even close to that answer.
Translation, I'm up for the challenge.
That's right. She was basically saying it'd be really sanctifying to live with
You
Chris.
see this old bag of bones? Can you imagine living with that?
And that's the kind of person she is. She's a lovely sister, but she has that kind of mindset. But there's a lesson there, which is that that you want to be preparing this couple, whatever curriculum you're choosing, personal advice you're giving, biblical work that you're doing with them, preparing them for the reality that this is going to be a sanctifying experience.
That's right.
They're going to have the opportunity to give grace and to forgive and to overlook offenses and everything you see about what love is in 1 Corinthians 13 in a way that they don't even anticipate.
Mm-hmm.
The person they love the most is going to hurt them the most. And that's a sliding scale. That hurt may not be a huge deal, but the person you love the most is the person who has the potential to hurt you the most, even if it's a disappointment, unkind word, something. And so this is going to be your opportunity to make much of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you want to kind of focus in. And there's not one way to do that.
Yep.
We have also I have used a book called Sacred Marriage by Gary Thomas. I'm sure there's better marriage books out there, but it's just the one that I have used for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one that Becky and I read before we got married. And I recommend that to everybody. Paul Tripp's is good. I have read that as well.
The Ortlands have one now.
The Ortlands have a book. John Piper's book on marriage. Tim Keller is his book on marriage is very good. So, but find a trusty resource. I usually have couples read, a chapter or two in that book, in addition to the kind of workbook, Tying the Knot. And those resources are helpful, but you want to just make sure that you're focusing them on the gospel of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anything else to say
That's
on
great.
that? Okay.
Nope.
This comes from Kevin via email. He says, what should the relationship between pastors and deacons look like? Yeah. Pastors and deacons.
Yeah. This might sound like
Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Same question, same answer that girl gave to the guy. No.
Sanctify.
This might be overly simplistic, but I think if you're looking at Acts 6 as the relational model, it is a deacons, the diaconate exists to serve the needs of the people so that the elders can focus on the ministry of the word and the ministry of prayer. And I think that should probably be the relationship. I think Matt Smethers has that amazing word that he uses when describing deacons, which is shock absorbers. I absolutely love that phrase, that deacons are absorbing some of the shock that happens in the regular life of the church so that the elders can focus on those two key aspects of ministry. So I think there should be from the elders to the deacons in Ephesians 4, equipping for the work of the ministry. From the deacons to the elders, a shock absorbing so that the elders can focus on the work of the ministry.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any background to Kevin's question at all, but I'm thinking of the typical, I'll say Southern Baptist Church, it could be Baptist Church, maybe other churches that are Baptistic that I grew up in. The relationship was, I think, it was upside down according to the biblical
elders,
so you have deacons who really...
That's important. I'm assuming good ecclesiology.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
You had deacons who kind of a deacon board that served as like overseers in the church, which is really the pastoral function.
Yeah.
So you have deacons doing eldery things, and you don't have elders. We wouldn't use that term. We did have elders. We call them pastor or pastors, but if you have more than one. but they were almost like the ministry staff.
Mhm.
And it was almost upside down,
Yeah,
where the
without a
deacons
doubt.
basically led the church or oversaw the church,
Yeah.
and the pastors were like the employees
Mhm.
of the deacons or of the congregation who were dispatched to do the ministry, and they would report to the deacons.
Yeah.
That's completely upside down. That's completely upside down. And if you're in a church that practices that way, your ecclesiology is upside down.
Yeah.
It's unbiblical. And it may, I won't say it's just as simple as a nomenclature change, because I think there is a kind of wrong-headed ecclesiology there, or a distortion. But in some ways, like at my last church, as I began working through with the deacons, because that's what I inherited, solo pastor model, deacons served as overseers. The deacons were actually doing a mix of eldery things and deacony things. And part of kind of leading them to accept plurality of pastors, establishing eldership, was helping them distinguish between pastory things or eldery things and deacony things.
Yeah.
And I started to have deacons go, this kind of feels like an eldery thing. And so
Yeah.
let's not weigh in on that, or
Yeah.
let's hold off on that.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. And there are times, even at Liberty Baptist, where at an elders meeting, we'll be in a discussion about something. And at some point, one of us will go like, this actually kind of feels like a deacon thing.
Yeah.
Like we're spending, so to your point about, or Smether's points about the shock absorption, we're spending a lot of bandwidth on a thing that really the deacons should kind of take this.
Yes.
Like it's an admin thing. I don't know if this is original to Thabiti Anyabwile, but his book, Finding Faithful Elders and Deacons, which I've used, I find it really helpful. He, I think, uses the illustration of like pastors decide where you're going, deacons make sure you've got the gas to get there. There's a lot of practicalities in the midst of that.
Yeah.
I think there's overlap. Deacons do spiritual things, pastors do practical things. But in general, those are the two categories.
That's
where
right.
Pastors are focused on the spiritual life, deacons on the practical life, or the application of that spiritual life. And the relationship should be, if you're, I don't know if this is embedded in the question too, pastors have authority over the deacons, spiritual authority over the deacons. Pastors should not be reporting to deacons as subservients or employees of deacons. If anything, it should be the other way around.
Yep.
And I've heard some argue that deacons biblically are almost like deputies, kind of deputized by elders. I think you can probably go too far with that language, but that just gives a picture of like
Yes.
who's in authority. That biblically speaking, pastors are in authority over deacons.
That's
so
right.
if you have a church where it's the other way around, it's upside down.
Yep.
Is that kind of?
That's exactly right.
All right. All right. This comes from Bob via email, and Bob, I'm just saying, and Ronnie has not seen your question, so I just want to take a time out to say we cannot do justice to your question. I wanted to address it because I felt bad for you when you sent it in, that if we didn't address it. So this is just for Bob. Is that all right?
That's all right.
No one else is going to have
Let's
any
go,
idea
Bob.
what we're talking about.
Yeah.
This is for Bob via email. Bob, you know who you are. I'm not going to do your whole question. I'll do a summary of your question, and I'm leaving out, I know, a lot of context, but that's okay. You and
For
I.
the others, tell them why. It's just a longer.
It's just a long. It was a
Yeah.
long, very long email, and
Yeah.
I don't mean that
Yeah,
critically
not
of you,
mean at all.
Bob.
No,
it's just too long for the
this-
mailbag.
yep.
But you and I know this is just for you and me. You and I know the context. I'm going to give a summary for everybody else. Basically, there's a fellow in your church who is unrepentant. That's my appraisal. Part of your question was, how do I adjudicate this? He is unrepentant for pornography use to the point it's affecting his family, his marriage, and beyond, your relationship with him. And you're at the end of your bandwidth. That's how I'm reading your question, Bob. You're at the end of your bandwidth to walk with him through this. What are the appropriate next steps? And you asked numerous questions. I'm going to say, Bob, you're on the right track. You need to begin the process of church discipline. I know that can be embarrassing for this fellow, maybe for you, potential conflict, etc. But this is beyond the point of just a personal besetting sin that you want to walk with a guy with. This is beyond. He needs some accountability. You've already explained that that's just not working. You asked, is there someone else you can bring in? Is that okay? Yeah, if there's another guy in the church who can take some of that bandwidth for you, do that. But yes, this is a church discipline situation, and we both know Bob personally. So, Bob, if you want to talk offline a little bit more about some of that. But I think you've got the right mindset and the right approach. You just need to, claim that. You just need to do it. It's just, so if you're looking for like permission or, are you on the right track? Yes, you're on the right track. There's nothing wrong with you pursuing church discipline in this situation. Okay, final question. This comes from Tony via X or Twitter. I don't know. Do you still call it? What do you call
I
it?
still call it Twitter.
I still call
I
it
don't
Twitter.
know what
I don't know if X will ever
will need
catch
to
on.
happen.
You know what's funny is publishers, when you like quote a tweet or something like that, they say X
Yeah.
because that's official.
Yeah.
And that always bothers me
We all know it's Twitter.
it's all Twitter. We still call it tweets. What do you call individual
Yeah, it's weird.
X
They're
posts?
tweets. Yeah.
They're tweets. All right. So this comes from Tony. It's the only question we got on social media. Everything else came via email.
Wow,
Which is
that's
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah. So Tony says, in Luke chapter 4, how exactly did the devil take Jesus up on a high mountain and show him all the kingdoms
Oh, that's
of the world?
amazing.
We
Yeah.
hardly ever get theological
Oh,
or
wow.
exegetical
Yeah.
questions. It's usually practical, pastoral type stuff. He's referring to, so I have the references here.
That is
Luke
so
4,
funny.
verse 5. So the devil took Jesus up,
Yeah.
and showed him all the kingdoms. And
That's
then
that's in Luke. That's Luke.
Luke, and then
One
again
of them says
in
high mountain, right? One he took him up on a high mountain.
yeah.
I think it's the
Well, in
Matthew
verse
version.
9, it says, so he took him up to Jerusalem
Yeah.
and had him stand on the pinnacle of the temple. So yeah, how exactly did the devil take Jesus up?
I have literally.
Do you have an answer for
I
this?
have literally never been asked this question.
I
The
never even
amount
considered
of
it.
exegetical theological questions that I answer, given my profession, is astronomical, and this is the first time I've ever been asked this question.
Yeah, I don't know, Tony. Unless here's
is
two
so
thoughts I
funny.
have.
Yeah.
I think this is. I don't think we should read too much into this. It's possible that there is some kind of supernatural thing that's taking place here, just like there are other places in the Gospels where we'll say something like, "And he hid himself."
Yeah.
Well, what's happening there? Is Jesus like crouching behind a pillar, a column, so no one can see him, or is he doing some kind of supernatural obscuring of himself? He got in the boat and immediately they were on the other side.
Yeah.
Does that
That's
mean
Mark,
they just immediately started to the other side, or did he like teleport the boat over there? I think we should be open-handed about those things. I don't think we need to be overly speculative about them.
That's right.
And have
it's kind of a fun question, though.
It's a fun question.
Yeah.
To me, the other thing I would just say is, if the concern is that the devil is somehow controlling Jesus, I don't know if that's the concern. He doesn't say that, but I could see that as sort of like, oh, what does it mean the devil took him? That kind of thing. Whatever's happening there, Jesus is sovereign over. Even in the beginning of the chapter, it is the Holy Spirit who leads Jesus into the wilderness. So you still have, I think, the priority or the supremacy of the sovereignty of God in that moment. The devil is not able to do anything that the Lord does not allow him to do.
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't a kind of the devil has authority over Jesus, or the devil can control Jesus in a way that Jesus himself would not.
I will say,
be pulling the puppet strings.
I did not. I don't mean this to sound like I'm not taking the question seriously. I didn't do any like review or anything for this, but it's I do think is pretty predominant in the early church and maybe even up into the Reformation that most exegetes, I think, for example, Augustine and Calvin are coming to mind. They typically render this as like a spiritual journey, not a physical one.
Oh, I see.
So especially with the reference, I think it's in Matthew, where Matthew's account says the devil took him up to a high mountain.
Yeah.
Where there's no literal high mountain where you can like see all of the kingdoms. And so it's like they render this as like a spiritual, because the devil's a spiritual being, they render this as like a spiritual sight.
Okay.
I'm not saying that's what like all that's how you need to exegete it, but I do think that's pretty common in the older exegetical literature.
Gotcha. So it may not be a literal taking.
That's right.
In any event, it's a showing.
Regardless, though, I do think we could say exegetically, what the point is the message, not the mechanism.
Yes, I think you're exactly right. I mean, I did only slightly more, which was basically 2 minutes before we walked over to record.
Yeah.
I was like, what is like? Let me look at the commentary, and I pulled Robert Stein's commentary on Luke off my shelf over in my office, and it's not a very in-depth commentary, so I wouldn't expect him to be, going super deep. And he basically says whether this was some kind of levitation or walking, we can't say.
Okay.
That's all he said. Basically, Robert Stein in his commentary says we don't know.
Yeah.
What this means.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
So Yeah, it's a good question. It's a fascinating question, but I don't know that it should cause us to be overly speculative or overthink what's happening there. Let's keep our theological P's and Q's minded, and then we can be somewhat open-handed on
Yeah, that's
whatever
right.
the physicality or the literality of the thing is. Good questions. As always, if you have questions for the podcast, please email them to us. I see those. I store those up. We save them. I review those. You can send anytime to mailbag@ftc.co. You could wait around on my social media for when I ask for questions and submit questions that way. But the best way is to send via email. And I'll say it again. It's mailbag@ftc.co. And if you enjoy the podcast, leave us a good review at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to or watch your favorite podcast. And until next time, may Jesus be big in your church.